Hey ladies, I'm so glad that you're tuning into the Beauty of Becoming today because I have a special guest for you, and her name is Erin-Rae Peace. She's a dear friend of mine, and she's just a beautiful soul. Like, she's just an amazing person, authentic, genuine, transparent, and she's just beautiful inside and out. So I'll just go ahead and say you're welcome for introducing you to her, because everyone needs an Erin-Rae in their life. Everyone needs that friend. And so I'll just go ahead and say you're welcome. But we're going to be talking about the topic of contentment. And we really dove deep into just the lies that we thought of what contentment was and what it looked like as a single woman pursuing Jesus, and just really shared what God has shown us concerning contentment and what that looks like, and what that truly looks like being lived out practically. I think sometimes we just have this idea and there's this concept of contentment, but God has really walked us through, like, okay, this is what it looks like for your life. And it's not as, shame-ridden and frustrating and difficult as it used to be in my younger single years. As I've gotten older, as I've grown, God's really shown me what that life can look like in Him. And so this is a really encouraging podcast, and we dove deep and got to talk about a lot of things concerning contentment. So I'm just excited to share this conversation with you, and I know you'll be encouraged by it. So I'm just going to stop talking so that you can listen into what God spoke through our conversation talking about contentment. Hey ladies, welcome back to the Beauty of Becoming. I am your host, Whitney McDermott, and this is the podcast created for single women pursuing Jesus, their purpose, and healthy relationships. So I'm so glad you're here today, and I have an amazing guest. She's a dear friend of mine, and you're just going to love her because she's so sweet, and we've known each other for a couple years now, and so it's really exciting. That's one of the things I love, is just being able to introduce you ladies to some of the amazing people that God has put in my life. And so without further ado, this is Miss Erin-Rae Peace. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, Whitney. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, super excited. And today we're going to be talking about a really important topic for singles, and it's a buzzword, I would even say. If you're single, I know you have heard this word, and it's probably been confusing and frustrating for you, like it's been for us. But we're going to talk on the topic of contentment, and what does that really even mean? Because I feel like we've been told different versions of like what that means or what that looks like, and just speak some truth into it. And like, what does God say about contentment? And practically, y'all know I'm practical. And so what does that look like practically lived out? Or what are some action steps that we can take today to really find true contentment the way that I believe God has designed it for us? So it's going to be a great episode. But before we jump in, a lot of these ladies probably don't know you. And so why don't you go ahead, tell us a little bit about you, and just maybe even a fun fact that you have for us.
So you already introduced my name, so I'm not going to say that again, but Erin-Rae, it's a hyphenated name, so Erin-Rae is actually my first name. Whitney was so awesome to play at my husband and I's renewal ceremony. Yes. We got married during the peak of COVID, so we ended up getting married at my parents' house, just with like a party of 10 of us. But we made it work, and God showed up, and it was special. But we were so excited to have Whitney and her sister Alicia perform at our ceremony. It was such a blessing to us, and long overdue. It's like, man, when is this going to happen, actually? Yeah. But yeah, I work at Convoy of Hope, been married to my husband, Aaron. Yes, he is Aaron as well, for 3 years now, really, in February.
It's hard to believe it's been that long already.
Yes, so I serve on the global program team there, and just really have the privilege of just kind of serving on that team, and I love the mission of that organization, and dear to my heart. So, but another part of me that I just am very passionate about is the fact that I have amazing 3 sisters as well, an older sister and 2 younger. and I'm just very close with my family. Family is a priority in my life, and love animals of all kinds. But I also, I'm very passionate about talking about relationships, and I never thought this would be something that I would kind of grow into, but I think through my own journey and just being able to mentor in different capacities at different seasons in my life, I've just been starting to find this common theme of like, this is something that I think that I never want to grow weary of talking about, no matter how my season shifts from time to time. So this is really exciting and privileged for me to get to join you in the conversation, Whitney. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's an awesome introduction. And what about a fun fact about yourself?
So, oh man, I am a huge Fred Rogers fan. So those of you 90s kids, 80s kids, Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, Neighborhood. He's just someone that literally I cannot wait to have a conversation with him in heaven. I just love the man so much. And if you haven't watched the documentary on his life, definitely recommend. But he's just such a pure soul. Yeah. And it's kind of a quirky, I'm kind of a fan, like a big fan. Like I have
fangirling over Mr. Rogers.
Yes, like I have books about him. I have,
goodness.
I'm just, I will quote him. Just love him to death.
That's awesome.
Probably another side thing is I just love tea. So different blends of teas, just, tea party. Literally, my heart's desire to have a tea party every day.
I am in for this. Why have we never discussed this? I love tea. I'm one of those weird ones who I just don't like coffee, and I wish I did. I'm one of those, smells really good, but I just can't stand the taste of it. And so I am here for a tea party. This needs to happen.
All right. Okay. Let's get it scheduled.
Yes. I love it. Well, awesome. It's so good to have you on the show. And, I love, as you were talking about just your testimony and your story and stuff, just touching on it, the ladies listening, here you got married and you've been married for about 3 years. But you walked through a lot of the same struggles that all of us have as single women. And I know we've talked about it. That's contributed a lot to why you do have a heart for relationships and single women and stuff like that. And you have such wisdom to bring to the table. We were just talking before the show started, and just the stuff that she was pouring into me as I'm telling her, what's going on, and just some of my highs and lows right now, and just the wisdom that she has to pour into me, because you've been in my situation, and there's even some things that we're co-struggling with together or walking through together kind of thing. And so why don't you go ahead and just tell us about your journey as being a single woman and dating, because it wasn't that long ago. And because I know that's played a big part in why you're so passionate about this topic.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was that girl in high school where guys just, I didn't get much attention from them. I was very shy, so that didn't help. But I also had just this constant question of what's wrong with me? Why do guys gravitate towards these girls but not me? And yet, I had parents, telling me you're special, ErinRae, it's going to take someone unique, and, just, hold out for that.
Those are always the worst words to hear too. I'll just add in, because it's if I'm so special and unique, why am I still single?
Yeah. And it becomes a broken record.
Yes.
Over time you hear that over and over, and it's you want to believe it, but when things aren't happening and momentum isn't there, you're is this ever going to happen for me? I watch everybody else experience this, or at least it feels like everybody else. But yeah, so going into college, I had a few talking, just short stints of talking with guys, but it really didn't really amount to anything. And just going on to grad school, I had, a couple of shorter stints, just getting to know guys and really growing, and just what am I looking for? And, it's really was a journey of just exploring even myself. Relationships have a way of revealing a lot about us. And, And so really it took some disappointments, Whitney, honestly, for me to really kind of come down to, I desperately need you, Lord. Like I think that I was seeking out so much affirmation and security in a man that I kind of had to go through some struggles in that area to just see, like, okay, at the end of the day, what am I left with? Am I left with nothing? Like, if a relationship doesn't go well,
Right.
does that mean that I have nothing? Because that's not the truth. Like, I'm whole still.
Yeah.
And so then when Erin came into my life, it's just something was different, and we had both been through our different experiences, and I just had a peace, and I knew that it was absolutely worth the wait. I wouldn't change anything about the process. I turned 30 this year, and we've been married a couple years, and it's just it's been so revealing prior to being married, but also in marriage. I've learned a lot as well, and we'll dive into that as well. But what about you,
Yeah.
Whitney? What's been your experience?
Yeah, definitely a similar experience in that when I wasn't getting attention or like I wasn't dating someone. And listen, like I was always like very mature for my age, and I always like looked older too. So that was like, and it was always taller. Like I'm 5'10". So, growing up, guys aren't that tall. And so, just felt a lot, definitely internalized that. And, like you, there was guys that I would like talk to or go on some dates with, and didn't have a boyfriend until after high school, and have only really had a couple, since then. And so it's like, definitely I have to fight not internalizing that and being like, okay, it's something that's wrong with me, or even struggling. And I'm going to be doing a whole episode on this of just, God, you called me to be this woman of God, or like, you want me to chase after you and pursue you, but yet that seems like the thing that's getting in the way of me, like having my dreams happen as far as like marriage and stuff, because when you're really sold out living after God, like that's really going to narrow down your dating pool. You know what I mean? Like that's not necessarily that's what guys say they're looking for. But when it comes down to it, like it does take a special guy that's like pursuing God as much as you are. And so definitely found a lot of discouragement, and just, and it was hard too, because then you have people always speaking over you or praying over you. And it's just like, when you get so lost in God, like that's when you'll find this person, or, when you quit looking for it, they'll just like show up. And those like I said earlier, like they're just not, I know they're like meant with like good hearts and good intentions, but that's not always how it's received.
Yes.
Especially when there's a broken perspective there, like I had. And so a lot of times that can come, that caused me to like have resentment, either towards myself or towards God, because it's like, well, Whitney, you don't love God enough, then, or you just keep messing things up, or like just for wanting, just still desiring that, you know what I mean? Then I was like, oh, because you can't get over this, or you can't push that desire aside, like God's mad at you, or God's like probably up there rolling his eyes at me.
Yeah.
Like literally these are like all thoughts that I've had, and even some that I still struggle with to this day. And I have a friend of mine that she talks about how with situations, and not just with like dating, but just in life in general, when we have a perspective, say, about ourselves. So like for me, like I'm undateable. I must not be pretty enough. I must not, like have that sex appeal, or I must not like whatever, fill in the blank. Like I'm too tall and blah, blah, blah. She said when we have a perspective, then everything that happens that's like supportive of that perspective, like we just pile on this like evidence pile. So, so if like someone told you weren't good enough when you were younger, then every time that you fall short, or every time someone says you're not good enough, like then that's just more evidence that must be true. And that's not the case, And so that's been a struggle for me, is just realizing that like, okay, first of all, nothing's wrong with me. I mean, we all always have things we can like improve on and heal from and get better. But as far as like nothing's inherently wrong with me, that makes me undateable.
Yes.
And that goes for every woman listening to this podcast. And I think I even like elaborated on that in the first episode. Like nothing is wrong with you to make you undateable. It's not that you're not pretty enough. It's not that you're not sexy enough. It's not that you're not interesting enough. Like none of it. Nothing's wrong with you. This is just the place that God has us. And we may not understand why, but there's purpose in it. And like this is God's best for us right now, even though it may not feel like it. And so I'm sorry, I feel like I did like a really long.
No. Keep going, keep going.
Yeah. And so, you know, nothing is inherently wrong with us, and God has a plan and a purpose. And so as a single though, like I said earlier, like just contentment was something that was thrown around. And like I said, once you quit looking for this, like it's going to happen or blah, blah, blah. And so for me, I feel like contentment is a word I always like cringed at. But now it's one that as I'm getting older and starting to realize like what true contentment looks like, you know, I'm starting to realize like, oh, it's actually like a good thing. And it's not something that is going to heap shame on me or, you know, make me feel guilty about like emotions I have or thoughts that I have. But it is achievable.
Yes. And
it's a good place to be. And so I just want to talk to you, since we do have like similar experiences, like what is contentment to you, and maybe what was it before, and then like how has it changed and transformed now?
And I just love what you shared, Whitney, about just, you know, we kind of take this approach of like that God is like, there's a lot of shame and there's a lot of judgment being cast on if we have any doubts, if we have any messy thoughts or inner dialogue that's not pretty, that if we're angry, if we're resentful, if we're disappointed, if we're genuinely sad and lonely, that something's distorted, that our faith is messed up, that we don't have faith, that, you know, that doubt and faith can't coexist. But I really think that they can. And so really my journey was a lot of just before I got married, I think that I genuinely thought to myself, I am a wreck. I am a mess. Like, do I really have faith? Do I really have trust in God? Contentment to me was very much like the equivalent of being positive. Yes. That I just needed to put on a smile, and that I had to compartmentalize this part of me that just had this really strong desire to be in relationship, to be married. Like that I had to completely just like block that from my mind. And if it was coming to service, that it meant that God, you're not good enough, that you're not enough. But, you know, I really think that God was really speaking to me on how extreme I had went. I went to an extreme, and, you know, when you go through disappointments and you go through struggles in this singleness season, you know, you sometimes feel like you're in a raw place. You're in, and I felt like God just started loving on me in those spaces. I never fully experienced God's love until I had gotten to some really low points. And so if you're in that space right now, or you've been there, or, you know, when you find yourself in that space, the God that comforts and the God that's loving on you is the God that would never speak to his daughter and say, why do you feel these things? Why? Like, he would never ask you the why. He would just be like, I'm here, and exist with you in that space. And so contentment to me, it really, Whitney, I had misdefined it as I'm happy, that I'm fine, that I'm joyful, and I'm bubbling with excitement. Like, that isn't practical, and that's not being human. And we have to understand that God understands human nature better than anyone else. In fact, he came in human form so that he could experience the weight and the gravity and all the emotions that come with it. And so I just find great comfort in studying Jesus and studying how he would comfort people, that even in his word, he talks about collecting tears, that he hears the cry, that he hears the groans even. Like, how incredible to know that our God has not asked us to shut our emotions down. He's asked us to invite him into those spaces.
So good.
So for me, contentment has really needed to take a different shape, and it's needed to be like, because you never fully feel like your desires are met just when you feel like, oh, I finally got married. That's it. That's my joyful place. That's my true satisfaction. Everything is up to speed now. You will find yourself in the same place of discontentment because you put all of your ducks in one basket. All the rocks are in one bucket. And so the moment that is all of a sudden your new norm, what do you do with that space when, oh, I idolized that as my solution, and God's calling me to a greater level of peace and security in Him, and that has to translate in marriage and in outside of it. So the spaces of singleness, the space of singleness right now is absolute training ground for what must be in your marriage as well. It is not in vain. It doesn't stop. And I've had to kind of learn that the hard way. It's like, even in a wonderful, healthy marriage, like a wonderful marriage, I'm so grateful for my husband, but he was never fully meant to satisfy me. And so if we can really just hone into that, God, what kind of love do I need to receive from you and accept from you, and truly know the kind of love you have for me, so that carries into a relationship, because that's going to create stability and security in your marriage when maybe you're having an off day. Which married people, everybody knows. Or a season that's really difficult and you're questioning God. There's a space that's in that in between. So I am now the one rambling.
No, it was so good.
Whitney, what sticks out to you? Just want to hear more from you.
Yeah, I'm like taking all these mental notes, like, yes, that's so good. That's so good. But I love what you're pointing out is all of it, but just saying, this topic of contentment isn't just a singles topic.
Yes.
But that's how it's always been presented. You got to find contentment as a single, find contentment until those things happen for you. But it's like, no, I mean, as a married person, contentment is still something that you have to deal with, that you struggle with, that you wrestle with. Just meeting one person and getting married, even if, like you said, your husband is amazing, like even meeting the most amazing person, marrying them isn't gonna stop you from needing to figure out what contentment looks like in your life and for you, because they are human. And marriage, like, as holy and as beautiful of a thing that it is, like, it's two humans coming together, and so it's gonna have its ups and downs at times, or messy moments. But what you're saying is so true. Like, if we can figure out what contentment really is and looks like for us as single women, like, how much more easier is that going to make a marriage in the future? How much better is that going to translate, like, into that next season? And I love what you were talking about of how God just sits with us in our emotions. And I've always thought it's really interesting. Actually, I've been watching the Passion oh my goodness. The Jesus series.
Yes.
Oh, there's so many. The Chosen.
The Chosen.
Yes.
Yes.
The Chosen. That's how you know you're, like, been a Christian for a really long time. The Passion.
Oh, I just love that show so much.
Yes.
If you haven't watched it, definitely look it up.
Yeah, for sure. And because of, like, your encouragement, I was like, I do need to watch that. So I just watched an episode last night where they were sitting around the fire and just talking. Mary was there, the mother of Jesus, and while he's, like, out ministering to the sick, and she was giving kind of a backstory, and, like, Joseph had passed away, and many scholars have concluded that because he's never mentioned, like, much after Jesus was 12 years old, and then Jesus asked John to, like, be his mother's son, like, when he goes to heaven, and so obviously at some point, like, Jesus lost his earthly dad. And so they're just kind of, like, showing his humanity. And, like, when he was a baby, she's like, I still had to change his diapers and, like, teach him how to walk and all of this stuff. And it was interesting because in the series, one of the disciples was like, wow, I lost my dad when I was younger, and I need to ask Jesus about that. And that just like, that specifically hit me because my dad has passed away, but, just that humanity side that I think we forget that God has, because he did send Jesus to come in like you said, fully human form, that he understands loneliness. Yes. And he understands having a desire and not seeing it fulfilled. He understands, people betraying him, like stabbing him in the back, relationships that he thought were solid, which, I mean, obviously he like foreknew because he was God, but still like that's to invest and to pour into someone to just leave you, to feed the thousands just for it to be like 150 or so, like in the upper room, and so I love that picture of, and that's like something honestly to this day I still have to fight with, of God, are you like mad at me because I keep bringing this up in prayer? Are you upset with me because like I'm really sad that this desire hasn't come to fulfillment? And just fighting against that like angry picture I have of God, or that like upset picture that I have of God, and just like kind of retraining my thinking of like, no, that's not God. He's not upset with me for being human. Like he made me human.
Yes.
And so that's what I've learned, because I was, oh my gosh, when you were talking about your picture of contentment from the past, I'm like, yes, that was totally mine. Where I thought to be content meant that I no longer had that desire, or where it was like, yeah, it'd be cool to be married, but like, whatever, if it happens, it happens. Or just to like be so focused on the work God has for me that I no longer like am sad that hasn't happened yet, or things like that. But I've really been set free in the last, I'd say, year or two of just that, living in that paradox of I can be content, yet still maybe have some hard days where it's like, man, I wish, like I always dreamt that this would happen for me before it did. And I'm really sad that it hasn't. And it's okay just to like experience that and to feel it, because for so many years I trained myself to just stuff my emotions and for anything, like whether it was about, marriage, or whether it was about just like a disappointment of a different goal that I had that didn't happen, or like, cause I had to set aside school for a time, or, I had loved ones pass away that I didn't think would, at that time. And so there've just been things where, instead of feeling that emotion, I've just stuffed it. And to be called faith. You know what I mean? Like air quotes there on faith, because I thought just not giving into that meant that, okay, then I have strong faith. And that's what we highlighted. We have some notes for this episode, and I literally have it highlighted, of what you wrote, of just because you have unmet desires and struggle with perspective does not mean that you don't have strong faith.
Amen.
And that is so true. Ladies, just because we have our bad days, like doesn't mean that we don't still like love God and love Jesus and want and have our life surrendered to him and are pursuing him.
Yes.
Like contentment doesn't mean that you don't have any disappointments.
Yes, exactly. And I think one of the most potent like schemes of the enemy is any way that he can pull you away from God. Any way he can create walls and create barriers. And so if you find yourself even struggling to even speak to him, start by even expressing your doubts, your anger, and your frustration, because even though I think we have this idea of, well, what does the dialogue need to look like with God for it to be like an intimate, a strong, wonderful conversation with him. Prayer life is not about perfectly articulated love and praise for him. It is also about the many questions, the doubts, the I don't have the evidence now, the I don't understand you, God, I don't understand this. You look in any chapter in Psalms and you see the remorse, you see the pain, you see the anguish, but you also see the truth that comes out of the vulnerability that was displayed. And so I just think that God would rather you be close to him and be angry and lash out at him and yell at him and cry. Like he would rather you be that way than not talk to him at all.
Come on.
In fact, intimacy with God requires that. It requires being on your knees and be like, I don't understand this, and I don't understand you, God. Why do you say you have my best interest in mind, that you have good things for me, and yet this something that I care so deeply about is an unmet part in my life, an unmet desire. And so I just encourage you, lean into that. Even if it seems messy and it seems ugly, he wants that because it means that you are at least engaging him. You aren't turning your back on him. That is better. Closeness with him, no matter what it looks like, is better than you turning your back on him. And the enemy works overtime, especially in the singleness season. He works overtime to separate you from him because he's the problem, or he's the person that could have met the desire but didn't. Or hasn't.
Yeah.
And so we blame him.
Right.
And he understands that. He understands that if we know him to be all powerful, then we're going to question his ways. He knows that. He's not surprised by those doubts. And so when we call on him, just know that he longs for intimacy with you. And anytime you feel like you can't even echo a word, just know he hears the groans. Like he hears even just your tears if you're driving and you're alone in your car and there's no words. There's just sadness. And that space, he's in it. And he understands that things don't make sense right now, but you don't have to always know exactly his ways for him to be in that space with you. So I love what you said, Whitney, is like he just wants to be. He wants to exist in that in-between space.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be really the groundwork and foundation of our faith for the rest of our life when there are ups and downs and disappointments.
Yeah.
If we have one disappointment or one unmet desire and we correlate that to the goodness of God or the lack of goodness of God, that is when our faith is no longer rooted.
Wow.
It's based on circumstance.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's what David had a key with, like, if you go back and read through the Psalms, which I always encourage people when they're like in difficult times, read a psalm a day or whatever, because you'll hear your heart cry and you'll be like, did David really say that to God? Like, did he really get away with that? But yeah, he was a man after God's own heart. But it's because David had the key of just like, I don't understand, but I trust you, or because of your everlasting love, or because you've, delivered me from the past, like things I've gone through. Like, I know you have my back now. And that's the key I found. Because literally, you're talking about God would rather us be vulnerable and, like come to him with these emotions. Like, I was just thinking as you were talking, literally any time that I've gone deeper in God, like has always been in those like heartbreaking moments of just like, God, I don't understand. And I know you're wanting me to say yes, to go deeper, but this like really hurts. And this is like me dying to more of myself. And I literally like, in the last month have had this experience where I was talking to my spiritual dad and just kind of like talking through some of these things, because we do have a choice of saying, all right, God, this is as far as I want to go. Like, I'm a Christian, I'm saved. Like, I'm good with just doing the Sunday church thing and, and we'll be saved and we'll go to heaven, but that's like all we'll ever get to experience with God. But if we're willing to just keep pressing in, and even when it's like, this thing hasn't happened in my life and I don't know if it ever will, but God, like, I'm still going to say yes. And and then that takes us to that deeper place with God. That takes us to a place where we hear him more clearly, or he's like, he trusts us to share more revelation with us. And those have been some of like the darkest nights of the soul kind of thing, but like every time I get on the other side of that yes, it's like, I'm so glad I said yes. I'm so glad I still continue to surrender. And so I just encourage you ladies, like, even don't disqualify those hard times or allow the enemy to put shame on you for experiencing those, because those are actually the catalysts to go deeper in God and to know him better and to experience him better. And that's one thing he shared with me about that scripture that says, those who mourn will be comforted. And because I was going through some like hard things, and I can't remember like at what point in my life it was, but I was just like, man, God, like I keep going through these things, like this is hard. And he's like, yeah, Whitney, but not everybody gets to experience this level of comfort. Like you have to be mourning to experience that comfort.
Wow.
And so it's like, yeah, I hate going through difficult things, but at the same time, like I've gotten to see some sides of God that not everybody has been able to see yet. And not because I'm special or anything it's just because I've walked through some things, and anybody who's walked through some things like can testify to that. But, so I just circling back around to just like contentment and, contentment. It's okay if it looks like, God, I trust you, but I still don't understand. Or God, I know this is your best for me, but it's not what I would have chosen for myself. And today I'm just a little bit sad about it.
Yeah.
Or it can look like, a friend getting married and being like, I'm super happy for her, but, I'm kind of sad for me today, or I'm kind of grieving that what I thought would have happened by now hasn't happened. And so we just want to like release you ladies into just that freedom and give you permission to just live in that like paradox, live in that tension of I do trust God, but I'm still experiencing these things. And just another point I want to make too, and I know we've probably already covered it, but just God's not surprised by our desires, and God's not upset with us for wanting, because he put that in us.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Literally from the beginning, from the garden, like God knew it was not good for man to be alone. And so don't shame yourself, and don't let anyone else shame you for wanting to get married or to have a family or whatever that is, because God put that in you, and it's just a matter of the timing and walking it out, and just doing it in his timing. Hey ladies, I just wanted to take a quick break from the conversation to share another aspect of my ministry that might be an encouragement for you. So you may or may not know that in addition to this podcast, I'm also a part of the sister singing duo Alicia and Whitney. Not only are we sisters and singers, but we're also songwriters, worship leaders, authors, and hosts of the podcast Coming Up Higher. And if you're like me, I am always searching for spirit-filled, positive content to listen to and watch just to stay filled up. And it's our hearts to equip and inspire others to cultivate a deeper relationship with God through our worship, our podcasting, the books we've authored, and our humanitarian efforts. If you'd like to learn more about our ministry, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Alicia and Whitney, and go ahead and listen to some of our music wherever you buy or stream music. We have 2 albums called Core and A Portrait of Worship, as well as some other singles that we've released, and we have a brand new album coming out this year, so get ready for that. And please subscribe to our podcast Coming Up Higher. It's where we discuss how to see everyday life from God's perspective. So you can find all of this and more by visiting aliciaandwhitney.com. Now let's get back to our conversation. What's some like scripture, I guess, that we can, because as Christians, like I think it's always important, like, is it rooted in scripture?
Yes.
I'm all about, y'all know me, like I'm all about hearing the voice of God, but it always has to be confirmed through his written word as well. And so what are some scriptures that like God has revealed to you concerning this topic of contentment?
Yeah, and I love this verse. Paul says in Philippians 4:12-13, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. And this just strikes me as a joy verse. Like, where is my joy from? And that is apart from circumstances, and it's rooted in the Lord. And I love that, when you think about contentment or you think about joy, really, when we look at Scripture, it's actually drawing us more to the eternal hope we have in the Lord, that He has a place for us in heaven, that we can be with Him forever, for all eternity. And so when we think about that, sometimes we almost have to zoom out a little bit and see our eternal hope to understand that yes, these are hard things and these are hopes unmet right now, but there's a larger story. There's a larger kingdom. The kingdom of God surpasses all of my everyday. And so I can still live, I can still have purpose because he has a place for me here. He has things for me to do. He has vision to cast to me. He has inspiration to give to me. He has influence that I possess. And I actually think that even the joy that we can get through even mentoring other women in our lives in the season that we're in, I guarantee you, any space that you're in, if you're willing to be vulnerable, if you're willing to share, God will use you to bring healing and to bring wisdom to other people around you if you ask for it, if you're open to it. That was something that has really given me it's actually strengthened me and given me a lot of joy over the last several years, is being able to share my story. Nothing's in vain. It's just not.
That's good.
It's a little rabbit trail there. But what about you, Whitney? What is a verse that comes to mind?
Yeah. Well, I just want to touch something that like God's been really, I don't know, it's just sometimes there'll be like words or just like thoughts that in certain seasons are just like really like just stick out to me a lot. And something lately has been that we're in a bigger narrative than like what we see playing out. And so you just even talking about like having that eternal perspective, that's because we're a part of a much larger narrative than we just realize in our day-to-day lives. Like it's so much bigger than what we're just thinking. And so that's like something that God has really been showing me and just reminding me from time to time, is that, Whitney, like your experience right now and today, like is not all there is. You know, like I have plans to like take you places or to show you things, or like even like our eternal home and things, you know, that there's so much more than what we're experiencing now. And so just keeping that encouragement, because I think sometimes and I know it's actually like easy to get discouraged when we feel stuck or when we feel like, man, this is all there ever is. Because that's not the case. Like God has plans and a future and a hope for you. And so just remember that you're not just a speck on earth, like just existing to like sleep and eat and work and repeat. Like God has adventures for you. God has callings for you. God has people, like you said, like in your path to encourage and to walk alongside and strengthen each other, lift each other up. So don't allow the enemy just to make you focus in on this is all it's ever going to be. This, you know, we live in seasons. And so literally like it's got to change. That's what I tell myself sometimes when it's hard. It's like, okay, this is just a season. It's got to change at some point. So Whitney, just keep pursuing, keep going, keep moving forward. But actually, Paul is like the star of the show today, I guess, because I have a verse from him as well. And it's actually the Message version, which is like a paraphrase of scripture, like a poetic kind of paraphrase. But sometimes I need that to like
simplify.
Yes, and it just sticks out more easily sometimes. But it's Corinthians 7:17. He says, "And don't be wishing you were someplace else or with someone else. Where you are right now is God's place for you. Live and obey and love and believe right there. God, not your marital status, defines your life." And I love this part because he says, "And don't think I'm being harder on you than the others. I give the same counsel in all the churches." I'm like, you know, he had to put that disclaimer on there because when people, I'm like, I always feel like the people say the same things to me, like, why God, like, why again? And he's like, don't be mad at me. Like, I say this to everybody.
That's amazing. That's such a powerful verse, though. You know, this is fertile ground for identity crisis. This topic, everything about this is directly linked to how we view ourselves, where are we in the world? Why do we exist? And he's speaking to this identity piece. That God defines your life. Yes. I love that. That's so good.
Yeah, and honestly, like this verse, when I feel like I'm falling behind or when I feel like I'm not where I want to be, just in any area, I just have to I remind myself like, no, okay, right here is where God has me. You know, I need to, what did he say? Live, obey, love, and believe just right here. Like this is God's best for me right now because I'm surrendered to him. Like I'm following him. You know, I'm trying to make choices in alignment with what he's leading me to do. And obviously, like, we're going to mess up from time to time, but I believe ultimately, like, if our hearts are in the right posture, then God's not going to let us get way off track.
Exactly.
You know, and if we do, he's going to get us right back when we're like seeking and pursuing him.
Yes.
So that's been an encouragement for me, is just like, all right, no, this is where God has me. Like,
Yeah.
may not be where I would have picked, but this is where God has me.
And there might be things in this season that he needs to clarify to you. Maybe even spark passions in you that maybe you'd be more numb to, or maybe less likely to almost be desensitized to maybe what he's saying. I think God knows exactly the posture we need to be in to reveal certain things to us. And just know that, like, you know, what he reveals to you in this season could be the very things he doesn't want you to compromise in your future, maybe in your future marriage. What is he defining? What is he encouraging you to do right now that will just completely translate and just move right into your marital season?
So good.
It is not a waste. This is not a waste of time. This is you finding you and what God has for you, and that must be sustained whether there's a guy in the picture or not. The guy, and in fact, I really do think that you'll be less likely to compromise even your standards when dating, or when you are looking into a potential spouse, because you will know who you are in the Lord. You will know what are some of the things that you cannot live your life without.
Yep.
And if that guy does not respect that or want to walk alongside that and encourage that, he's not for you. Because God will bring someone to accompany you on that road.
So good.
It will never be someone that will hinder or debilitate you from pursuing what God has already clarified in your life.
Yeah, it's so good. I'm going to have an episode on that too. So about, just the person that God has for you. Like, you don't have to make yourself smaller or stop or pursue God less to fit into that mold. But God has somebody that's gonna run with you, honestly, run the race with you, and be the helpmate that you need, and you'll be the helpmate that they need to become the people that God's called you to be and do what he's called you to do.
That's right.
So that's so good. So let's just wrap this up. I know we've talked about a lot of different things, and but it's all been so good. Like, I'm excited to just listen to this over again for myself.
Yeah, me too.
But I just wanted to kind of, because I know we talked about a lot, and so just hit a couple of like the application points of like, what does this look like practically lived out? Because I think that's part of what's hard when people talk to singles about contentment, because then it's like, well, then, okay, so what does that look like?
Yes.
You know, like, you told me to I don't know, just like chase after God, but like, what does that really look like? And so I wanted to just first off say, just to give yourself grace, and that we shouldn't be looking at ourselves as self-improvement projects. And I actually like saw a thread on Instagram and shared it, and so this is from that. But just realizing that we're not like these broken things that need to be like fixed all the time. I mean, are we broken people? Yes. But like, inherently, like, we're, God has made us as good, and he loves us, and we're worthy of that love. And so just realizing that, like, if I have days where I'm struggling or things are difficult, just realizing that, just give myself some grace and some love, because I'm human, and I'm not just this like project. I'm not this machine that needs to be operating at 100% capacity all the time. Like, I'm gonna break down every now and then. Need some maintenance.
So good.
Yeah. But just to give ourselves that grace.
Yes.
And then I think another thing is about living in the contradiction of life.
Yes, that tension point that we talked about. So good.
Yeah, just being willing to, just giving yourself, again, grace to, like, it's okay that I'm a little sad today. As long as it's like, stay stuck here. And as long as, even if I don't feel it, I still declare, like, God, I know you're going to work this out for my good somehow. I don't know how, but I trust, because you've delivered me before, or you've taken care of me before, you're going to do it again. And then I wanted to reiterate the point about, just because you have unmet desires and struggle with perspective does not mean that you don't have strong faith.
Yes.
So, yeah, I want the ladies to be encouraged by that.
Absolutely. I mean, it is absolutely like the enemy wants you to feel very distant from God in those moments. In fact, and that's, I think, why there's such a misconception of like, if I don't have, if I'm having any doubts whatsoever or questions that I'm not close to God or I can't get close to God, those things can absolutely happen together.
Yeah, that's good. And my last point, and if you have more, you can add on, but I just wanted to say, just remember that like these days that we're living in right now, like these are the important ones, because they are laying the foundation for the future. And I know you talked about that earlier, because sometimes I'll find myself just trying to like having this escapist mentality, when like life gets hard or it's just like really overwhelming, where I'll just start daydreaming about like future stuff or, just different dreams and things like that. And Holy Spirit's been convicting me a little bit on that lately. Not because, we should dream and like have goals and things like that, but it was to escape my reality because I didn't like where I was at, and the Lord was like, but don't you see that like today is important because it's building what you're dreaming about in the future?
That's right.
Because even like sometimes when I'm like at home worshiping, because I am a worship leader and like lead on stage and stuff like that, like sometimes my mind will just go to like picture myself like leading worship for like other people, and it's like, wait a second, none of that would be like, it would have no power if it weren't for the moments where I'm at right now, like on my living room floor communing with God.
Yes.
And so which one's more important, when I'm like leading on stage with people, like, or is it in my living room when I have the tissue box, like bawling my eyes out?
Yep.
And I was like, man, like right now is the most important time. What am I thinking? Because like nothing would be effective if it wasn't for like what I'm building and cultivating with God right now.
Amen. That's so good. And just even in marriage, God will get through to us one way or another. And sometimes some of us learn that in marriage and others of us learn that in our single season. And so just, speaking from experience, there were things that I wish that I had I had known as a single person, that I've had to learn in marriage, just about reconvening with God, like really like pressing into Him more, needing Him, that dependence on Him. And so anything that you invest in your walk with the Lord now will carry you into marriage. But some way or another, He's going to awaken us to this reality of we desperately need Him. Whether we have a man or not, we desperately need Him, and it will come to a head at some point or another. It's just His way of drawing us back to Him. Like He wants us to be hungry for Him. It's not that we can't desire human love. It is not, that is not a sin. That is literally, we've been wired for that. But it cannot be above our pursuit of God. Wow. That must be a priority in our life. And that's something that I myself am still growing in. I don't think I'll ever reach that. But yeah, just I think a few things that I would just, add. And I love what you were sharing, Whitney. And, I think that, it's really important that we have community around us. We've talked about, so needing more girl time and just, we need community. It takes a village, whether you are, single or you are married. You need your girlfriends, and you need relationship, whatever that looks like. So if that is something that's lacking in your life, even if it's just one or two people that you can talk openly with or be vulnerable with, even if that looks like, doing occasional counseling with either a mentor or a clinical counselor, whatever, that looks like for you, or even in a church context, community is essential. And sometimes they kind of pull us out of, it's very easy to become very introspective and melancholy. So anytime you can be around people that just remind you of who you are, that you haven't lost who you are, that you're whole and that you are joy and that you have so much to offer, that's really, really powerful. Another thing would be, in those lonely spaces, having a game plan in place. Whitney, you and I have talked about how sometimes that looks like having a self-care thing on the calendar, or a fun activity on the calendar during the week, or like, I'm going to go grab a bite with some girlfriends, or I'm going to take a bath and bubble bath and light some candles, or indulge in my favorite hot drink or whatever. We have to do these things to just for some self-care that must be embedded into your every week, and that will still carry on into marriage as well. But just create those spaces to love on yourself, to enjoy, to find some things to enjoy still. Journaling's also something that I would recommend as well, whether that's audio journals or there's so many different options right now, or just journaling. It doesn't need to be like 5 pages, even if it's just a paragraph, just as you're processing through some things, and it will be something very special that you can look back on as well. Just a few things that come to mind. But
that's good.
Anything else, Whitney, that you can think of?
Yeah, I was just reminded of something I saw on social media again, and I can't remember, and I wish I could find it. I've looked for it and I can't find it, but it was something to the effect of, treat yourself the way that you dream that one day, like, your future husband will treat you, like, or it was something like that, said way more elegantly than what I just said. But basically the idea was, like, quit just daydreaming about, like, oh, this person will, like, buy me flowers or take me out to nice dinner, or, like, be my sounding board and, like, all this, like, start doing that. Like, why wait? Like, start doing those for yourself, because you're worthy of that now. Yes. And so even, like, yesterday I went and bought myself some roses because I was like, I would just want flowers.
I love it. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I know one day I was, like, having a really rough, it was nighttime, and nighttime's, like, always the worst typically for me if something's going to come up, And so I was, like, having a rough night, and I was, like, heading home, and then I was, like, going home to an empty apartment, and it's just like, oh, great. And then that, like, thing, Holy Spirit reminded me, like, well, what would that husband of yours do? Like, and so I was like, okay. So I ended up, like, reaching out to a friend just to, like, have someone to, like, bounce off my hard day with. And she, like, sent back some encouragement and was, like, praying for me. And then I journaled, which is what you said, and just took a nice hot bath. And then I was good. And what normally would have been, like, crisis mode, meltdown, like bad day or bad week, turned into, like, oh no, this is, like, I got this, like, me and God got this, and my friends, like, it was a really good picture. And so now, like, Holy Spirit can be a little sassy with me. Now it's just like, well, what did your future husband do? So, yeah.
But I love what you did, though, because it was proactive. It was like, I am not going to sit here for 3 hours and sit in this space. I'm going to bring someone else that I trust into this inner dialogue, because this inner dialogue is not serving me well.
Yeah, so true.
And it's very quickly do we get in a hole that's hard to get out of. And so you had an action plan.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change the feelings, but it does help you cope, and it does remind you that there's still tomorrow, and there's still a good evening ahead of you, even if it looks a little bit different than your future self is saying it should look like. And I love hearing just some of those practical things.
Yeah,
so
same. And I love what you said. That thought didn't serve me. So ladies, like, get that standard set. If that thought doesn't serve you, all right, then what do we have to do to shift and adjust? Because we've lived too many years with thoughts that didn't serve us and with ideas that didn't serve us, and relationships that were not healthy. And so it's like, what am I going to do? Like you said, to be proactive and start living a life that's worthy of, like, my value, and the value that God's given me and the wonderful ladies around me. But, well, this is so good. I'm so glad
we could probably talk for like 5 more hours.
Oh, exactly. I know. And we already have, like, a next topic for a next episode.
Yes.
So this will not be the last time you'll be hearing from Miss Erin-Rae, which makes me so happy. And so just thank you for, taking the time to come into the studio. She drove over here, y'all, to be here in studio. And so I just really appreciate your friendship and your encouragement and your ministry. Like, I don't know if you see it as a ministry or not, but how you pour into women like me, and married women, and just everyone around you, like, is a huge ministry, and you're a huge blessing.
Whitney. Thank you so much. It's been a joy to be here today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies. So glad you could tune into this conversation, and we will see you next time on The Beauty of Becoming. Thanks for listening to the Beauty of Becoming podcast. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, let me know by leaving a positive rating and a comment of how God used today's episode to speak to you. And don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you listen so you're notified whenever a new episode is posted.